Hey, good morning, Fullerton. It's nice to be with you today. I'm Mayor Jennifer Fitzgerald, and this is a virtual town hall meeting. Many of you have joined us for other town halls, and we're happy if you're a repeat offender, so to speak, to have you join us today. And if this is your first time speaking with me this way, I really appreciate the opportunity to be able to get together with you. I hope that you are healthy and well right now. I hope you're getting back to your lives. And I know our kids are out of school here in Fullerton, and we're in our house. We're having a real old-fashioned kind of summer. That's a lot of just running around the neighborhood and enjoying being out in the open. So I hope you are too. Um, I wanted to talk today about something that over my 8 years on city council, I have heard repeatedly from people, and that I repeatedly say, fix our roads. And the questions that I've always asked our staff and the questions I get are, why aren't we fixing more roads? How can we fix more roads in town? And so I've asked David Grantham to join me today. David is on staff with the city, and he's our senior civil engineer in public works. That means that he's responsible for our capital improvement program, and he's responsible for all large scale projects like streets, sewers, water, storm drains, buildings. David really is in charge of all of our infrastructure. And so we're really pleased to have him here today so that he and I can have a conversation about how the city got in the position that we're in with such bad roads, what this city council and what our staff is doing right now, and how we're looking to do more in the future. So let's see, want to go ahead and start with, before we get into that, a couple quick updates. And as I do, I can also see the comments that are coming in on Facebook. So if you have questions as David and I are having this conversation and you want to be a part of the conversation, please go ahead and put those comments up on the screen and we'll do our best to respond to those. But let me tell you about a couple quick, great things that are going on in town. As you may know, as soon as the COVID crisis hit, this city sprung into action to try to minimize the impacts on our local economy, to try to help the most vulnerable and those in need here in town, and to make sure that we would be able to recover as quickly as possible. So one of the things that we've most recently been able to do is set up a pedestrian gathering place on Wilshire Avenue. We're calling it Walk on Wilshire. And the restaurants that are there on Wilshire and Harbor have come out into the street, and there's outdoor dining opportunities. Tonight is actually the grand opening of Walk on Wilshire, and we would invite you to join us in a safe, physically distant kind of way at 4:30 there on Wilshire. I also want to let you know that if you own a business that wants to use some of the space outside of your business for outdoor dining or for retail, the city's developed a really simple application process to allow business owners to use those public spaces. The application's free. You can find it on our website at cityoffullerton.com. Again, it's on our website at cityoffullerton.com, and it's under our community and economic development page on that website. We also passed Tuesday night as a city council on a unanimous 5-0 vote. If you know our city council, that doesn't come very often, but we were able to get all 5 votes in favor of a rental assistance program. And that eligibility is as follows. To be eligible to get rental assistance, you need to be a Fullerton resident with a residential lease. That can be a month-to-month lease or a long-term lease. You just have to have a residential agreement. You have to fall under the federal housing and urban development maximum household income level. You have to have experienced a documented economic impact because of the COVID-19 pandemic. And there's more information that can be found again on our city website at cityoffullerton.com under agenda and minutes. And that rental assistance is in the form of up to $1,000 grant to residents who qualify. And it is on a first come, first served basis. So if you need that kind of assistance, please go to our website and get the information on how to apply as soon as possible. So let's turn to talk about our roads. I know as a lot of us, I mean, we've been inundated with having to respond to the emergency before us that the COVID crisis created. But long before the COVID crisis, we have heard from you and we share your concern about the condition of our roads here in Fullerton. I know as well as you do that we've got the worst roads in Orange County. Science proves that. We are rated the absolute worst in Orange County for road condition. And I know as long as I've been on city council, I've been committed to trying to increase the funding that we have available to fix our roads and find long-term stable sources of funding for our roads. I want to thank my fellow city council members because this has been their priority as well. I want to thank Mayor Pro Tem Jan Flory, council members Jesus Silva, Maud Zara, and Bruce Whitaker for everything that they do to benefit this community. We last year asked a committee of volunteers who are residents of Fullerton and passionate about infrastructure needs to come together as a committee called INRAC, the Infrastructure and Natural Resources Advisory Committee. And we created that January 2019. The 9-member committee of Fullerton residents researched, analyzed, provided input to the city council on their what they see as policies, plans, and broad programs that they would like to see instituted in order to fix our roads. In order to understand, I think, where we are today, it's important to know how we got here. And Fullerton is what's called a full service city. That means we don't contract out our major services like say most South Orange County cities do. We have our own police department, our own fire department, our own water utility, our own public works department. We have our own city employees who deliver service in this community. We, as you might know, are one of the oldest cities in Orange County. And we, as a city, have developed our infrastructure over the last 132 years. We're unique among cities in really how our city developed through our history. Streets don't decay overnight. They decay over years and decades. And that's really what we see happening now. In 1955, the population here in Fullerton was only 20,000 people. And between 1955 and 1975, the city's population grew to 100,000. During that time was when most of our major roadways and residential streets were built. So between 1975 and the year 2000, roughly every 6 to 8 years, all the streets in Fullerton were slurry sealed for maintenance. So slurry sealing is far less expensive than total reconstruction projects. And streets during that time period were maintained on a 6 to 8 year schedule. In the early 1990s, that was really the longest period of growth, of course, in American history. In the 1990s, let me back up. In the 1990s, the longest period of growth in American history was cut short, and there was a recession for 2 to 3 years. And that's when the city first saw its infrastructure struggling and our budget struggling, and money was taken out of the road program to fill other gaps. And then, of course, we know in the 2000s came the Great Recession, and city revenues were significantly reduced during that time. There were significant impacts to our general fund, and there was no dedicated funding available to ensure that continued stream of revenues for street maintenance. So we stopped paving streets. Right now, the city is attempting to pay back the debts that it incurred during the Great Recession and keep all of our operations, all of our full service operations up and running. So right now, we really have a balancing act to try to play catch up. Since 2009, as I said, the city's general fund has never really recovered wholly from that Great Recession. The state's gas tax, Measure M2, the local county transportation tax, and the new increase in gas tax that was done at the state level through SB1, that brings in just under $5 million annually for street maintenance. So with the construction costs far outpacing the revenue that we get from those sources, that $5 million, we have a real deficiency in how we're able to address our roads. With COVID, we have an even greater shortage of property sales and transient occupancy tax. That's the tax that people pay when they stay at our hotels. So the INRAC committee, that Infrastructure and Natural Resources Committee of Fullerton residents that I told you about earlier, they've estimated the city needs an additional $24 million every year to catch up on our failing infrastructure. This city council has done a couple things. We have dedicated one-time new revenue to this to repaving our roads. So when we've sold what we call surplus property, take the Meridian Sports Club, for instance, when we sold that property, we, as a city council, dedicated the proceeds of that to go into road repair. And those road repairs actually are happening right now. Also this week, the city council created a new local law that mandates that 50% of any new tax revenue over a certain baseline amount to make sure we can continue to provide other services goes to infrastructure. So again, as a city council, we voted to say that any new tax revenue, 50% of that new revenue will go into infrastructure. We are looking as creatively as we can for ways to fix our roads. And maybe, David, I could bring you in here and you could talk about how the city picks streets to be improved and how prioritization of streets that also need water and sewer repair happens here in the city.
Absolutely. Before I get to that question, I just want to point out to our residents here a little bit of my background. I'm actually a Fullerton resident since 1986. Went to Troy, went to Fullerton College. After I graduated from university, I actually spent 20 years as a private consultant doing civil engineering. So I was on the other side for 20 years. And for the last 3 years, I came back to the city of Fullerton to work in the engineering department. So I work it, I live it, I breathe it. So, on the weekends, I drive the same streets you drive. So I do fully understand everyone's frustrations and wants and needs to get these streets repaired. That being said, it's also my job to determine or recommend to council the streets that we pick each year based on the available budget that we have. For the last few years, because we have very limited funds coming in, and I can go into that separately if need be, but basically we break it down into two areas: our arterial streets, which is our big major streets, and our residential streets. And the way we're addressing our residential streets right now is when we also address our water and sewer repairs in the residential streets. So what that means is we actually get to extend our limited street budget when we combine it with our sewer and water repairs, because water and sewer will pay a small portion of the street repair cost, the trench work, etc. So it helps us get a little bit more street work done. But also you got to understand when we go in to do water and sewer repairs, we're pretty much destroying the street to do that work. So it kind of makes sense to repair that street, because once we fixed it, we won't be needing to go back into it again in the near future for water or sewer repairs. So the intent is to fix everything once, and we can just do the hopefully get back to slurry seal, which is a lot cheaper maintenance activity for that street. That's how we're addressing it right now, and that's really just based on the limited funds that we have available.
David, thanks so much, and thanks for introducing yourself. I should have made sure that I asked you to do that, so I apologize, and thanks for doing that. Talk about how much does it cost to slurry seal a mile of road versus fully reconstruct a mile of road?
It is significantly different. Let me see. I think I have a little. Let me see if I can pull this up. Got a few slides here. Okay, it might be covered under the picture here, but every year I update our cost to reconstruct. Let me see if I can. There we go. To reconstruct and rehabilitate our streets. So every year I update these budgetary costs based on our bids that we get from contractors every year. So as you can see, there's a huge difference between slurry seal and full reconstruction.
So slurry seal, the cost per mile is $126,000 for a local road, whereas for full reconstruction for a local road, it's $1.8 million a mile.
Up to, let's just say it's up to that much. That's what we use as kind of the worst case scenario. But I also want to point out here, this is not the construction cost. This is the fully burdened project cost.
Sure.
So it's a lot cheaper to design the slurry seal project. We don't have to do concrete work. We don't have to raise manholes to grade after we're done paving. It's just a much more straightforward project. Therefore, the cost is a lot less. When you do full reconstruction, we have to go through a full design phase, geotechnical investigation, survey. We are required by the ADA requirements to upgrade all our ADA ramps that are adjacent to the road. We fix all our concrete, our sidewalks, our curb and gutter. Then we have to get into removing the existing materials that are in the street and putting new materials in. Plus, we got inspection, we got testing of the materials to make sure compaction is correct. It quickly adds up, and that's why these costs are up to 1.8 million, depending on the condition of the road when we start, the existing soil conditions. Not every road is the same. Some roads need a thicker pavement section, some don't. So, 1.8 million is a lot of money, and we go through that very quickly with our limited budget.
Yeah, thanks, David, for that. I mean, for me, it's really eye-opening. I mean, when this city back in the early 2000s stopped this 6 to 8 year slurry seal program, that in my mind was really kind of the beginning of the end to where we find ourselves now, because we're so far behind the 8 ball now, so to speak. And don't we have 300 miles of roads?
We have about 68 miles of major road and 230 or so miles of local roads to maintain.
Okay, so about 300 miles of roads, and about that those same miles of water and sewer pipes too.
Absolutely. Actually, it's a little bit more, because sometimes we have multiple lines in the same street. So I think we've got 400 miles of sewer and probably close to that in water mains as well.
Yeah. Maybe David, talk a little bit. I mean, there are cities around us who are also old cities like ours. Why are their roads so much better?
Yeah, I got that question many a time from our residents. The city of Fullerton basically gets their revenue from the standard revenue sources, property tax, the state's 1%. We get 1% of the state sales tax. Other cities around us either have a much more robust sales tax or revenue sources, or they've added additional revenue sources through voter approval. So such as Placentia back in 2018, they passed, I believe, a 1% tax increase for their streets. And I think your people who drive through Placentia are starting to see that. La Habra, 10 to 15 years ago, passed that. So that's why their streets are, they went through and did a huge project on their streets back then. Santa Ana's done it. Santa Ana's sales tax rate is 9.25%, whereas the city of Fullerton is the minimum at 7.75. So other cities have increased their revenue sources by other means, and the city of Fullerton, for many different reasons, has not been able to do that.
Well, yeah, talk a little bit more, David, if you could, about what taxes we have, especially talk a lot about property tax, would you? Because I hear a lot from people, look, I pay my taxes, fix my road. And I completely get that. But there's a bigger story there.
Yeah, there's an absolutely bigger story. And quite honestly, I didn't realize it until I came back to start working at the city here, where my property tax went. So let me find the slide. So I think this is a good representation that people can quite quickly understand. Your property tax. Some people think, and I'll say I did too, that all of it goes to the city. Well, it's far from the truth. As you can see, kind of highlighted, 15.64, let's call it 16% of every dollar you pay in your property tax comes back to the city.
So 16 cents of every dollar comes to the city. Everything else goes somewhere else.
Yeah, so let's just kind of put that in perspective. Let's just say your property tax is $4,000 a year. The city gets of that $626. That's all we get from your property tax to run the entire city. Now, when you break that down into what the city costs and needs are and expenses are, it boils down to public works, which is engineering and maintenance department, gets $44 a year from the property tax to maintain our infrastructure. And our infrastructure means water, sewer, storm drain, but really it goes to the trees we have, our parking lots, we got to maintain our street lights, all those other things. So there's a lot of background items that cost money, but we really don't get a lot of it from the property tax to help offset those costs.
So let me make sure I got this right. $44 a year per property, basically.
Basically, if you had a $4,000, property tax bill.
Okay. Yep.
It's eye-opening. It was for me, at least.
Yep. Absolutely.
And the other thing I want to point out here is I have another slide. Your effective, what was called the effective property tax. It's a slide that's good for residents, not so good for cities. So you can see depending on where you bought your house the year there, you can see at the bottom essentially what you're really paying as opposed to what your current value of your house is versus the assessed value that you're paying on your property tax.
And this is Prop 13 that we're talking about, the Prop 13 protections that guaranteed that your property tax could not go up more than 2% a year.
Right. So, if you bought your house in 2000, you're paying 60% of really what the current rate of that house is. So like I said, great for the resident, horrible for the city, because we're not gaining that revenue that we would like the cities need basically to keep functioning.
Yeah, I mean, and Prop 13 protection has enabled the vast majority of us to actually stay in California and live here. But the impact that it has on local city finance, as you say, David, has been great. I know property tax isn't the only thing that funds our city. When I usually talk with people about, this answer to this question, I pay my taxes, why won't you fix my road? I share with people what you just did about property tax, that basically 16 cents of every dollar stays here in the city. For gas tax, a nickel, we get a nickel in gas tax funding here in the city, and we get less than a penny of sales tax that stays here in the city. So we are running this full service city on 16 cents, a nickel, and a penny. And it is very challenging when all the costs of providing these services are exponentially going up every year. And someone in our Facebook comments was talking about pensions. And yes, I mean, the cost of public employees is great. The pension cost is great. And we are mandated as a city to honor that pension obligation, and we do. And so we watch very closely the decisions that CalPERS, the pension fund, makes regarding our pensions, because we have a huge financial obligation there. Yeah, go ahead, David.
Yeah, no, go ahead. Coming from private and then coming to public, there is a perception about the public employees' pension. And I'll just let you know that when I came in about 7 years ago, before I came in, the pension system was reformed, and the pension I get, yeah, it's a pension, absolutely, but it's not what you think it is. That's all I can tell you. It is certainly not anything that you're gonna go live on an island for the rest of your life and put your feet up. It is something, but it's certainly been reformed. I think the obligation that I've come to find out is from the people who have already retired, and we still have to fund those pension obligations. So I don't know if people realize it has been reformed, but we still have to get through the old system before we can reap the benefits of the new system.
Yeah, I love talking with you about this, David. And I'm so glad that you brought that up, because yeah, the pension system has undergone significant reforms. And a lot of the reason that we as the public don't see it yet is because it reforms pensions going forward. And you, as you said, you've been here for 7 years, and you are a part of it. Those employees who have been here for a very long time and those who have already retired were under a much more generous pension plan that we've been able to reform. So I know this is we could go on. We should do another town hall on this. This is a whole other topic. But the city does have a window of about 15 years where we are really going to struggle under the implications of the prior pension system before we get out from under that and have something much more workable, like is the pension system that you're under. So thanks for bringing that up. Let's talk a little bit about, we talked about what the cost to improve the streets is. Talk a little bit about that funding. So David gave a presentation to City Council Tuesday night, a very comprehensive presentation of where we are with regards to funding for road repair. I'd encourage you to go to the city's website, to the City Council page, agenda and minutes, and re-watch his presentation, because it's much more detailed than we'll be able to get into here. But David talked about how the COVID crisis has further impacted the funding that we get. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. The bottom line is for street improvements, which I classify differently as maintenance. Maintenance is the smaller repairs versus improvements, which are the large scale repairs that everyone wants on their streets. The bottom line is street improvements we don't have any allocation from the general fund, because we've discussed we don't have that discretionary funds available. We get our funding from M2, from SB1, and from gas tax. The gas tax also goes to help pay for our streetlights and the minor repairs. So the bottom line is those revenues are impacted because of the sales tax. They're based on sales tax, and what we're seeing is for next year, the estimates that the county and the state is giving us, I'll be down about $1 million next fiscal year, which starts in July, than the previous year. And honestly, I'm actually down another $400,000 for this year because of the reduction of expected revenue that was going to come in this year. So we're taking a big hit from this pandemic as far as the available money that's coming in. And they're estimating that's going to happen over the next few years, that it's not going to rebound right away. So really, we're looking at a budget for street improvements over the next, 3 or 4 years that's approximately $1 million less than we had the previous years. So if you look at a mile of streets, I mean, that's another mile of street that we cannot do.
It's not, I mean, I hear a lot from people who think that, because of all of these challenges, the city's not doing anything, that the city council doesn't care about the roads. But it's not true. I mean, you and I know that, David, and I'd like, let's talk a little bit about what your department, what this city council, what our group of volunteers through NRAC has been doing to address the need to repair and improve streets.
Right. So let's start with NRAC. So the city council, probably going on about 1.5 years ago, basically tasked NRAC, and I am the staff liaison for NRAC, to review all our infrastructure. And we've defined what infrastructure is, but it obviously involves the streets. And the NRAC committee was very interested in the streets. As far as they're concerned, they consider that the highest priority. So we did a comprehensive review of all the items, including the streets, showing, the condition the streets are in, the overall budgetary cost that we needed to fix the streets at that time, but also came up with recommendations on a yearly basis of what we would like to spend on the streets every year, so the residents can see a marked improvement in the condition of the streets. If we need about $150 million to fix the streets today. We don't have it. No one has it. So, the NRAC came up with a recommendation of spending about $15 million a year to show some improvement on the streets. But now the question,
and
where do you get it?
But practically speaking, $150 million today, we couldn't, even if we had $150 million, we couldn't snap our fingers and all the roads would be repaired. I mean, to be working on 300 miles of roads at a time, at the same time, that would be untenable. So
absolutely, and that's a very good point. I mean, it's a big number, but it's not practical. Absolutely.
And so I think, if I could, I think what NRAC, with their recommendation that we spend $15 million a year, that will show improvement. I think people want to see improvement, regardless of whether their street gets fixed tomorrow. People want to know that there's a plan. And that's the importance, right, of what NRAC's been doing.
Yeah, there's a light at the end of the tunnel. I mean, and again, the 15 million, as you pointed out, was more of a practical number in conjunction with showing improvement. There is only so much, that is really practical to be done during the year that the residents can stomach. So that's where that number really came from. I'm sorry, what was the other bit of the question? I got sidetracked on that.
No, so I'm sorry, and I interrupted you too, but we were talking about what the city is doing and has done recently. Do you want to talk about how we've used one-time revenues and the pavement management plan?
Right. Okay. So the pavement management plan, always also known as the PMP, is something that it's a report that's done by an outside consultant for a number of different reasons. One of them being it's independent. Number one. Another item is that you have to be certified to do it. But it's done every 2 years, and it's a visual inspection of our streets to show what the condition of our streets are. And the streets are rated from 0 to 100, 100 being best. I use it as a tool for budgetary needs, and also where do we want to look at focusing work on our arterial streets, because I've already mentioned that we focus our local streets on our water and sewer projects. So I use it as a budgetary tool, also for forecasting. Hey, how much money do we need? Where are we going in the future if we don't spend this much money? So it's a very comprehensive report from a condition of the street and where we will be heading if we don't spend, a certain amount of money. It's also a requirement from OCTA for us to complete this report, for us to obtain the M2 funds. if we don't complete this, we will lose that money. So obviously it's a positive in two ways. I'm sorry.
PMP and then the one-time revenues.
Thank you. That's what I thought it was. Okay, let me.
Hey, we're working. We're doing.
We're getting there. We're getting there.
That's good.
All right, so let me find this. I got another one. Okay. I'm probably jumping around. I may bring this back up. This actually is an exhibit of the streets that we plan on doing next fiscal year. I just want to highlight the items in red. Council approved working on 5 streets in the city. These 2 are coming up the next fiscal year. Jacaranda Jake was actually approved for construction by council last Tuesday, and Brookhurst is in final design. So we're moving forward with those. These 3 projects we just completed, Little Chapman, as we call it, Brea Boulevard, which hopefully a lot of people have been driving on, and then a residential street, Maple Avenue. So when on the odd times that we have extra money, the council has appropriated it to the streets. And I think we've done a pretty timely job of getting the projects out and getting them built. So, and again, I'm trying to not focus on one area of the city. Obviously I want to try and be as equitable to everybody. So I tried to spread it out throughout the city as much as I could based on a lot of criteria. So, you know, everyone will complain it's not my street, but I'm trying to, you know, put it around the street, around the city as much as I can.
Yeah, David, one of the Facebook comments asked if they can have access to, you know, like a PowerPoint deck that clearly lays out, I think, basically our CIP budget, our budget for water, sewer infrastructure, and our pavement management plan. I know I encourage people to go back and watch your presentation from last Tuesday on the pavement management plan, but how else can they get all the facts?
I think probably the best way, we have information on our website, and I'll be honest, our website's not the easiest to track down information. Actually, I would suggest you write an email, which essentially comes to me, but it's CIP, so Capital Improvement Program, CIP at cityoffullerton.com. And I can respond to that email with some links and some information that'll take you to presentations, pages of the website, the PMP report, any budget information, things that you would like to see. I would like to stress, you know, when people call in, I don't necessarily give them the answers they want to hear, but I'm happy that I can provide information that at least shows what the city is trying to do and how we're moving forward with it. My dad will show me, you know, comments on the neighborhood apps, and it kind of gets me a little frustrated. You know, if you see those questions, you know, or comments, my only comment to you is don't necessarily take those as being true. You know, reach out to us to see if it is true or if there's something else really going on. And I'll be happy to provide that information. I've done come out to talk to a couple of groups. And I believe that, you know, once you get the information out there, they have a bigger understanding and a better understanding of what we're trying to do, where we've been, and the limitations that we have.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. And we do, I mean, it's as you were talking about how people can access this information, it just reminds me of the conversation you and I and our city manager have been having for a long time, that we need a very accessible, easy to understand place of information on this. And so hopefully, you know, in the next month or so, and I know we've got kind of a draft PowerPoint going on all of this, but I personally would love to see us, you know, on the front page of our city website, have a click that goes directly to a PowerPoint where anybody who wants to see all this information and the challenges and what we're doing right out there. So you and I are already working on that, but I just wanted to mention that now. So there were some questions that came in ahead of today that we're going to try and walk through. And then as I've seen things that we can address from Facebook, we're talking about that too. I mean, one of the comments from one of the Facebook folks was that their street hasn't been slurried in 20 years. Will you, David, kind of tell us, are we doing any slurry seal now?
I started the slurry seal program back up again 2 years ago, but unfortunately, I had to postpone this year's slurry seal project because I lost $400,000 in revenue. And because I lost $1 million next year, that's the project one of the projects I have removed from our budget. Reason being, obviously, the slurry seal project is intended to take a fair condition street and keep it fair and reduce the deterioration over time. So it's unfortunate, but that was the decision and recommendation I made, and that is what we're moving forward with right now.
And that loss of revenue that you're talking about is because of the loss in sales tax funding and transient occupancy tax funding because of COVID.
Yes.
So that just put us further back in the hole. Let's talk about some of these questions. There's a question about repaving Raymond. Have you gotten questions about repaving Raymond?
I've got questions about pretty much every street.
I know.
I shouldn't laugh, but at this point, I kind of have to. So there's two sections of Raymond that jump to mind. We've got the section between Commonwealth and Chapman that's in fair-ish condition. We are actually this summer going to be as part of a bigger project, which is on Commonwealth. We're going to be replacing the water and sewer facilities on Commonwealth and then repaving from Balcom all the way past Raymond. So when we're there, we're going to go from Commonwealth to Chapman, and we're doing a grind and overlay of that section of Raymond. So that'll be fixed. But I also understand the section south of Orangethorpe. Yeah, that one's not in great shape. There's a lot of truck traffic down there. So what I've actually done is about a month or so ago, I contracted with our on-call geotechnical consultants, and I'm having them go to 10 different arterial locations to determine how would we rehabilitate the paving on these segments of road. What that means is that I have a much better idea of what the project costs are going to be to determine. So if we get any stimulus money or a pot of gold shows up or we get a lovely benefactor comes up, I can hit the ground running and actually, be a step ahead getting these projects done.
Well, in fact, I mean, you say, you talk about a federal stimulus funding. We are working hard to advocate at the federal level for a phase 4 of CARES Act to offset the revenue loss that we as a city have faced. And Congressman Gil Cisneros is working with us on this. I'm working with mayors up and down the state of California, advocating to the federal government that our cities, in the loss of sales tax and TOT tax, it's funding we will never be able to replace. It simply disappeared. And the holes that it creates in our budgets are devastating, like for this slurry seal program. So we are advocating at the federal level, and I'd encourage you too to write letters to your congressman and let him know that you support that. I think you might have talked about this, but we got specific questions about Valencia between Gilbert and Magnolia, Orangethorpe from Highland to Euclid. More questions about Orangethorpe. We are, I know, in talks with the cities on either side of us for Orangethorpe improvements, and Councilman Ahmad Zara has been, a big advocate for Orangethorpe repaving. But maybe you could talk a little bit about those streets, and are any of those in that 10, 10 area thing that you talked about?
This is the one time I can give some good news. Orangethorpe between Woods and Highland is actually programmed for this year. We're actually working on the design to rehabilitate that section, basically in front of Woodcrest Park. So that should go hopefully in the fall. Um, so Valencia, yes, that segment over by Gilbert to Magnolia, yes, that's been on my radar. That is part of the 10 sections that the geotech's looking at. Also, Orange Thorpe between State College and Placentia. Just so you know, the city of Placentia is actually going to be installing a sewer main through that section this summer. And also, the southerly quarter of that street is actually the city of Anaheim. So there's a lot going on in that street, but again, that's another street that I'm having the geotech look at. It's really, I just want to get a step ahead as much as I can if the money comes in.
Someone on Facebook said that the street patching isn't done well. And maybe can you talk about how people should connect with the city to report when a job is not done well, and how they can report potholes and other things?
So really the best way to report potholes is our app, our My Fullerton app. I actually use it quite a bit
I do too.
to report as I'm driving around sidewalks and potholes. It goes directly to our maintenance guys. They run a work order for it, and typically within a day or two, they're out there taking care of it. Another way is to write an email to maintenance@cityoffullerton.com. You might find that easier if you want to provide more information, additional pictures of things that you feel you want to bring to our attention. Or you can make a phone call, or you can send them to CIP@cityoffullerton.com. I'll see them, and I can coordinate with maintenance to see what we can do about addressing your concerns.
That's great. Yeah, thank you for that. I do too. I use that My Fullerton app all the time. My kids get sick of me pulling over to the side of the road and getting out and taking a picture and sending it in. But I do that because, I mean, we, again, sometimes, and I understand the frustration, but sometimes I get really frustrated communications from people, and they assume we don't care. And I think it's important that you know that we do care, and we are doing our absolute best. We are being as creative as possible with the resources we have to fix as many roads as we can. We simply are in a really challenging position with a lack of revenue to be able to do that with all of the other commitments that we have, and no dedicated source of funds for the roads, which brings up, I think, an interesting point. David, we've really been able to get ahead, or at least catch up, on a good schedule for repairing water and sewer pipes. How have we done that?
They have a dedicated fund or dedicated revenue source. So the sewer, 10 plus years ago, the state mandated that the sewer systems that are run by local agencies or districts basically go through and clean and update and basically make sure that they don't have any overflows. So those put a lot of requirements on the agencies, and that cost money. And so basically a fee or tax, if you want to, was included that addresses that. It's called our sanitation fee, and that brings in about $6 million a year that we can only use on our sewer system. And what's happened now is we've done a really good job. We're basically ahead of the curve now on dealing with our priorities on our sewer system. So we've upsized our pipes. We've rehabilitated our manholes, and I'll touch wood here, but we haven't had a sewer overflow in quite a while, and that's really helpful because we would get fined for things like that. So, if you get the money in and we know how to invest it, it really helps us out in the long run. And the same thing's happening with the water now. We're getting sufficient dedicated funds that we can start really making a difference on the water main replacement.
Well, and we as a city council voted to raise water rates and change the water rate structure. And that helped stabilize the amount of money that goes into that water fund, correct?
Yes, absolutely.
It's never, I mean, as an elected official, it's never easy to raise rates or increase taxes. I know for me, the whole time I've, been on council, My priority has been to make sure that we're running the leanest budgets that we can, that there's no waste, that we're, looking at what should be the biggest priorities for the city. And when it comes to roads, uh, there's no dedicated source for that. And it makes it extremely tough, nearly impossible to find the money that we need among all the other obligations that we have. Um, and so there's a couple other questions from Facebook I want to get to. One is, who's in charge of the alleys?
The city.
And so what if any alley program do we have?
We have not had an alley program for a number of years. I actually spent this over the Christmas. I had our inspectors go out and visually inspect every alley and update the conditions of the alleys so I can put an associated cost related to that. And that was actually part of INRAC's recommendation that we of part of the the monies that we need would be dedicated to alleys every year. It's very frustrating.
Yeah, no,
It's
I know.
you just can't win no matter what you pick. There's something else over there and over here that you wish you could fix.
Yeah. Well, and I think I know there's a comment on Facebook about this, and I hear this from, many people as well. Well, the city just needs to do an audit and cut costs and make the changes that it needs to in order to put that money into roads. And that person on Facebook's commenting, everyone's having a difficult time. The city should learn to adjust. I want you to know we are. We've asked every department to make severe cuts, and they have. Uh, every department, from public safety to public works and parks and rec, everyone is making severe cuts right now in order to balance our budget. And this is a fiscally conservative city. We run very lean. In fact, we are running nearly a 20% vacancy rate among employee levels, in order to balance our budget. That means that the expectations that we all have of city services are going to be a lot higher than the service we're able to deliver. If you were, governments grade their level of service from, I think, A to F, isn't it right, David? I mean, and with the level of funding that we have, we're guaranteeing a C level of service. Doesn't make any of us happy, but that's the state of the situation right now. So I hear you about cutting costs, and we've asked every department to do that. We just passed a budget that severely cuts across the board so that we can maintain the services that we do have. And unfortunately, there's not room for additional services.
And it just maybe I can get on my little soapbox as an employee a little bit here, at least from a public works standpoint. The supervisors over in the maintenance yard, you heard about the 20% vacancy rate. They're doing 2 to 3 people's jobs. I know my boss, public works director, and the city engineer. They're working weekends. I work weekends. The other supervisors work weekends, and no, we don't get overtime. So, the city employees do care. I see it firsthand. I deal with the maintenance guys, in the trenches. They certainly care. It is very frustrating to us. I mean, I don't know if you guys will accept what I'm saying, but I just want to put it out there.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, every department we've been asking and have received, cuts from every department, including police and fire and public works, parks and recreation, in order to balance our budget. And we, as a fiscally conservative city, are always squeezing absolutely as much service as we can out of this system with the resources that we have. And I will say, I agree with you, David. Our public works employees have to do yeoman's work out there, and I think they do a fantastic job. So I want to thank you, David, for joining me today here. And I really appreciate just the not even the competence, the expertise you bring to this and your level of commitment. I mean, especially as such a longtime Fullerton resident yourself, who you're in this with us. And I know that you bring that passion to bear for the residents of the city. So I really appreciate that. And for all of you who joined us today, thank you. We're going to keep doing this and talking about the pressing issues of the day on these town halls because we think it's important that we get to talk together and that we tell our story ourselves. So thanks so much. I wish everyone health and peace, and I'll look forward to seeing you soon.